Hello, everyone. Thank you for being so patient. I had a few technical difficulties because technology hates me today, but I am here. Hurrah. We are here. Hurrah. So thank you, everyone. I've really been looking forward to joining this because I had such fun last year. So I'm well pleased to be back again. So today, I'm going to be talking a little bit about karmic healing and healing the karmic wound, which sounds all kind of woo-wah and mysterious. But actually, once you delve into it a little bit, it has lots of everyday applications. And for me, it's one of those areas where the magic, the mundane, and the spiritual all kind of coalesce and swirl around each other. And I think that's one of the reasons perhaps why sometimes healing can be a little bit messy, because there's so many different layers. So today we're going to talk about healing the karmic wound. So what exactly is the karmic wound? It sounds kind of dramatic, doesn't it? And you've probably heard the term. I think it can be a bit new agey, for some reason we seem to look down on the new age, but it can seem a little bit new agey, and I think sometimes that's what puts people off. But it's not all glitter and love and light. Actually, it's some really serious stuff. In its most simplest terms, really a karmic wound is a trauma from the past. Unresolved emotional, psychological trauma from the past. And so that's what we can kind of look at it in its simplest terms. And when we put it like that, like how many of us haven't got a karmic wound, and they happen for so many different reasons, as many reasons as there are people in the world. But it's just one of those things that we tend to kind of just put off because we're all so busy, aren't we? We've all got constraints in our time. And I think sometimes magical practitioners, witches, we can all kind of put off our own healing. We kind of tell everybody else they need to heal, but sometimes it can be hard tending to our own healing because it can be difficult. But we all have a karmic wound, whatever that is. And I think sometimes, when we look at other people, it's easy to think that they have everything. So, for instance, if you take the world of celebrity, and we might think, oh, what do celebrities ever have to be sad about? They've got wondrous lives, they've got more money than they know what to do with. And yet we can see, don't we, if we look at the headlines, that celebrities are just human and they have the same problems that we do. And oftentimes, people we see as having a good life often have spectacular breakdowns because they don't heal inside. Sometimes when we have successes and we're keeping with those successes, it's easy to kind of put off looking at any negativity because we don't, it's easy to think, well, who am I to feel this way when there are people, going through even worse stuff? And we minimize our own pain and our own trauma. So I think that's one of the reasons why we tend to kind of put that away. I also think it stems from our cultures and our societies, particularly for those of us who live in westernized, industrialized places where, we have to get up, we have to be okay because we've got to get up, we've got to go to work, we've got to put food on the table and pay our bills. So there's a host of reasons why we kind of bury all of that stuff down. More often than not, though, I think that the trauma is a drip effect, so, and we just get used to living like that. We get used to living with the pain, we get used to, and it becomes almost a comfort to us. And so it can be really difficult to kind of even approach healing. And I think one of the issues is that are all of those different areas of being that we have, so our mundane lives, our spiritual lives, all of those, they're so distinct, when in real life, like I've already said, they kind of bleed into each other and they all coalesce, so it all turns into a massive tangle. So I'm here today to help you lovely lot untangle that. And there's lots of little things. I think sometimes the problem is we're always looking for that big fix, aren't we? That one single thing that can cure us. you know. So if I could only just have a holiday, then I wouldn't be so stressed. If I could only just have this medicine, then I won't be so ill. But it's never really the case, is it? You know, there's always a knock-on effect. And so what we're going to talk about today is how we can go about healing that karmic wound. And I want to talk a little bit about the axis mundi in doing that, because for me, it just fits so well with all of those different areas of ourselves, you know. So for those who don't know, the axis mundi can perhaps be, I like to explain it as the world tree, you know. It's the world soul. It's that, you may call it a pole, a spine, a tree is, and you've probably seen that image of the world tree. And it's kind of the world, you know, as a whole. So it's split into different areas. So at the bottom, now there are lots of different theories on this. This is my own. So you may go out there and you may see some that are different. And I always think you need to find something that works for you, particularly when it comes to healing, because it's so individual. You know, in my day job, I work in an autism specific school, and quite often the strategies we put in place for our pupils to use, more often than not, I think, oh my God, why aren't we using these all of the time for all people? And so it's really interesting how I've learned so much from them children. And so some of that feeds into today. So anyway, getting back to the world tree, it's split into 4 sections and each corresponds to a different plane, I suppose, for want of a better word. So at the bottom, we have what I tend to call the underworld. So if we use the imagery of a tree, because it makes perfect sense, if we use the imagery of a tree, then, so the roots would be the underworld, you know, and that would correspond in terms of healing to shadow work, all of those things that fall under shadow work. Above that, we would have the mundane world. So that's where we all are now, in the mundane, you know, our earthly realm. And sometimes I think we kind of, in the grand scheme of things, we are a bit harsh on our earthly realm, but it's where we spend our time. It's our lives, you know. And sometimes the mundane realm this is where it can get tricky, because we've got all of these things, and how can we deal with these and then have the time to ascend and whatnot and all of that. So above the earthly realm, then we have the celestial realm. So it's the realm of astrology and astronomy, you know, the planets, the stars, all of that jazz. And then above that, we have the spiritual realm. So the idea is that when you do any kind of work using the axis mundi, the idea is that you ascend or descend to whichever realm that you need to do that work in. You know, ultimately, when we're working with spirit, the aim is to travel up to the spirit realm, or the spirit realm travel down to us, so we can interact with each other. So that's a very simplified idea of the axis mundi, but for me I don't know, it is so meaningful, so I really like that. Before we go any further though, I think first things first, there is never any harm in seeking support, whether that's from your support networks, friends, family, but also there's absolutely nothing wrong with going and seeking medical or professional help. And I think if anyone's really struggling, I think it's always, you know, important to say that. So let's have a look then. So we take a kind of 4-pronged approach with this healing when working with our axis mundi. And so let's look a little bit at the underworld and the shadow work aspect of it. So shadow work is one of those terms, I think, where, I don't know, it can be a bit vague, can't it? What does shadow work even mean? What does it entail? And more often than not, it's really delving into ourselves, which is why it can be quite painful and tricky. And sometimes we just don't want to go into those dark places of our own psyche. Sometimes we don't want to kind of have a look at an issue deeply, because perhaps we, you know, for whatever reason, there's lots of trauma bound up. And I think shadow work is one of those things where it's not the first step. You know, I think shadow work is something that we have to come to when we're in a space for that. So for me, the work that we start with, the healing work, starts in our mundane world, okay? And I think this can often be difficult as well, because we have to make firm, hard choices. And quite often those choices, you know, they're difficult because they involve oftentimes other people. So it can be hard to kind of set boundaries when we know that people might be taking the mick. You know, so setting boundaries is something that I often get my clients and the people I work with to start with, because when you know, okay, I am willing to accept this, I am not willing to accept that, it makes everything else clearer. And I think once you've got that in your mind, actually it's empowering and it's a good place to start your journey from. So one of the things I get people to do is to get a notepad and make 3 columns. And in those 3 columns, in one, you've got your absolute no's. And in the far end, you've got your absolute yeses. And in the middle, then it's all that grey area. And we have to decide, you know, where all of that fits in. So this is something everyone can do. And I think even if you might feel, well, I've got no problems yet, I think this is something that everybody should do every now and then, because it just helps us to keep a clear picture. Because I can see in the comments, someone said we can't always see our own business when we're sitting in it. And that's right, we can't. So we have to remove ourselves a little bit. It's not too far, you know, but it's just about giving yourself the space to think, feel, and be. And that allows you then to really have a look at, okay, I know this, I don't like this, I don't want to accept that anymore. And once you have that, so I think that's perhaps one of the first beginning things you can do in the mundane world. And that allows you to kind of, it gives you a starting point, basically, doesn't it? It gives you a starting point from which you can go forward and continue your journey of healing, because ultimately that is the ultimate goal, to be as healed as possible. And I think healing is one of those things where it's always ongoing, isn't it? It's never just one thing and then we leave it. It's always ongoing. And so you can always come back to these activities. Even if you're feeling okay, sometimes you might just want to make things a little bit clearer. So making those 3 columns really allows you to see where your own boundaries are, because sometimes we might not know, as silly as that sounds, you know. So that's one thing that you can do in the mundane realm. So we're going to just take a little step back to the shadow work. So what I want to do today is give everybody an exercise that they can do in each one in their own time. And of course, try it, adapt it. If it doesn't work for you, then hey ho, you know, you've got a clearer picture of what will. So we'll go back down our world tree into the underworld. So shadow work. One of the things I really like to do in shadow work is journey work, because I think that particularly for beginners, because it's easier, I think, to have a guided journey when we're dealing with some of our own issues, because those issues are so strong and they can overpower and overwhelm how we're feeling. So I find a guided journey really helps you to stay on track with the task, with the meditation, with the journey. And it gives you that confidence to know that you've got a narrative. So actually, you've got a narrative, you know, it keeps you on that path of what you're wanting to achieve. So I think I love journey work as well. I absolutely love it. And like I say, because it's that narrative, a guided journey, because it is that narrative, and you're not having to rely on yourself, which is quite difficult, like I said, when you're doing shadow work, because lots of issues can arise. So journey work, there's lots of different kinds. If you bought my book, Witch Life, there's loads in there. But there's loads, so you can just go on the internet, you can find one from things like wherever you stream music from YouTube. There's lots of sites. It's worth spending some time if it's one you're unfamiliar with, It's worth spending some time perhaps just researching who's created it, what their background is, and also just having a listen through of that journey whilst not actually doing it, just to make sure it fits with you, because there's nothing worse than starting something new, than halfway through thinking, God, I just can't get on with this. Sometimes it might be the person's accent that's annoying you. So spend some time exploring. And I think it's important that we spend that time. You know, we talked about the constraints that gets in everybody's way and all of that stuff. Time for me is one of the biggest ones. And it's so easy. I can't count how many times I've thought to myself, well, I haven't got time to do this now, so I'll do it tomorrow. And then tomorrow becomes the next day, and the next day, and the next day. And the ultimate end is you don't do it because we feel guilty for spending that time on ourselves. So another important part of healing that karmic wound is giving ourselves that time, saying, actually, I deserve, and I am deserving of spending this time on myself. So that's the exercise that I think everybody should try for shadow work. It's a good way to get into shadow work without being overwhelmed by it all at first, you know, and you can find really good ones that are progressive. So, you know, you do it bit by bit. You might do one week, and then next week you carry on, and it progresses that way. But like I say, finding the time, making sure you set aside that time, because if we wait till we find the time, we never find it, you know. So let's go on up to the celestial realm. And in terms of karmic healing, it can be quite hard in this area, because, you know, in the mundane world, we're quite comfortable there. Even though we know all the things we need to do, you know, we might never do them, but we kind of know, don't we? And in shadow work, you know, if you've got a guide and you've got someone who can help you and progress you along, it's great. But in the celestial realm, unless you are an astrologist or really love astrology, you know, it can be quite difficult to find those correlations in our own life. And so for our work on the celestial realm, it's really just taking time to see the bigger picture. It's about exploring that bigger picture. You know, the other two realms are very much inner, you know, there are inner dark places, and there are everyday lives, places we are completely comfortable with. But the celestial realm, it gives us a bigger picture of what's going on in our surroundings, you know, and so we can use this to our advantage in healing. If we can ascend using the axis mundi to that place where we have an overview, so we see ourselves, but we see everything. It's like we can see the web that's going on. And in doing so, in being able to see that, in being able to harness the powers of the planets and the moon and the sun in our workings, you know, it really allows us to see how everything's connected. And it's like a web, you know, if you ding on one part, another part wobbles and wibbles. And so it's really important to have that overview, because all too often it's so easy to get caught up in our own world, you know, so easy. Little issues can be a problem. And, you know, that's saying the straw that broke the camel's back. It's true, isn't it? All too often, it's not being able to see clearly everything that's going on that puts the pressure on us, because we don't know how the next person's feeling. How many times are you sat, say, at work or school or doing something, and somebody asks a question and you think, yes, I'm glad they asked that, because I wanted to know, but I didn't dare ask, you know. And it's nice to know that other people feel the same. So by ascending to the celestial realm, it gives us a bigger view of what's going on. Not only does that allow us to put our own problems into perspective, which is important, but it allows us to be able to identify areas of need that we might never have thought about. It might be able to help us add to that list of firm boundaries, you know, because sometimes you might not consider things. So one of the things you can really do when trying to use the celestial realm for healing, I love to do sun visualizations, and you can do them at any time of the day. So one of the things that you can do is picture a place that you love to be. It might be your garden, it might be some imagined forest, it might be a place in real life that you visited. And you can use the sun's energy depending on the time of day. So you can do this at any time of day, but you can use the phase of the sun, is what I should have said, to kind of harness those energies that you want. So the sunrise might be a quiet kind of energy that really soothes the soul but builds you up for the day. Noon is that hard, strong solar energy that gives us that power to just kind of direct where we want to go. And for me, the sunset is kind of more relaxing and restful. So what you can do in this visualization is you visualize yourself in that place where you are, and you just spend a few moments in that. So for example, me, I love the woods. So if I was feeling quite stressed out but I couldn't get to the woods, for example, I might do some meditating. I might ascend the axis mundi to that celestial realm, and then I might do a sunset visualization there. And it's just about, it's almost like you're putting yourself in that space at that time. So, feel what it feels like in that space at that time. So what does it feel like in the woods at sunset? What does it feel like in your place at the time of day that you are hoping to kind of bring those energies in? So that's one thing that you can do. And what I like about that exercise is that if you've only got a couple of minutes, then it's great. Because I think one of the things we often do, we think to ourselves, I haven't got like 10, 20, half an hour to do this thing, so I'm not going to do it. When actually it's those short, sharp, little bursts of healing that can actually make the biggest difference in that moment. So I always think that's really important as well. So please don't think, I haven't got 10 minutes to do a journey. Use visualizations instead. Really, really good. And then we have our spiritual realm, the ultimate goal when we want to work with spirit. And this is, you can use this realm so many ways when doing healing work around the karmic wound. A lot of times it might fall into that area of healing ancestral lineage, that kind of thing. But I always feel that that's quite an advanced subject. So what can we do today when we are so busy? We might not have that time. We might not want to go down that road just yet of ancestral healing. We might just be busy healing ourselves right now. What can we do in the spiritual realm? There's so many things to do. I do want to talk about the ancestors because for me, my ancestors are a huge source of strength and power in my magical and witchcraft work. Obeah, which I practice, is very much a spirit work tradition. And so spirit work is one of the things that I love. So working with your ancestors in healing. I always think if you know your ancestors, great. So I have an uncle who passed away only a few years ago. So I do a lot of work with him. So he was my uncle, but he was my dad's youngest brother. So he was always more ours than theirs. Do you know what I mean? But he was also quite protective of me. And so when I do healing work with the ancestors, it's usually him and say my grandma who I might work with most. So being able to choose someone who you are comfortable with to do your healing work, one of your ancestors, is great. And then what you can do is you can make a little ancestor bottle. You can do a little ancestor ritual where you just call on them, And one of the things I like to do is just talk aloud to them. So I often sit in front of my altar and I'll just talk like they are there. I feel they are there. And that in itself is massive in healing, just being able to talk through what you are doing. But sometimes we're not always comfortable doing that with people. So ancestors are great. If you don't know your ancestors, then there are still ways of working with ancestral spirits. You might, for instance, decide that you want to work with ancestors generally. So your lineage generally. And in that case, I think it's about deciding what you want to draw from them. What is it you're wanting to get from them? Because we have to remember our ancestors were once people. They're not mind readers themselves, or they might have been, who knows. But, we have to be able to tell them in order for them to help us. So speaking aloud is great. But if you don't know your ancestors, that's one thing you can do. You can also work with like the ancestors of the craft, for example, and there are loads of figures you might choose from. I also think, and I don't know, sometimes, oops, I also think that you can work with other spirits. So you can work with plant spirits, because when we think of spirits, we always think of, you know, people who used to be alive, you know, our ancestors. However, you can work with plant spirits, you can work with tree spirits, you can work with animal spirits. And actually working with nature spirits can be really empowering in our practice, because it removes that divide, or it removes something in us that we are holding ourselves back, you know. And we can also, when we're working with the spirits of trees and plants and animals, we can also use the associations with those in that as well to help us heal. So it might be, you know, you go into trance work, and you work after building relationship with the spirit of a plant. You go into trance work and you ask that plant to help you heal. You know, speak to it as though it was a human ancestor. You know, I think these are things that we can all do. So one specific exercise for the spiritual realm is to choose a spirit you would like to work with, whether it's an ancestor, whether it's a friend, whether it's human or non-human. Choose one that you would like to work with, and then begin to get to know it. Okay, so if you've got an ancestor, it might be just learning a little bit about their lives, learning a little bit about where they came from. You know, if you're working with a plant or a tree or an animal spirit, it's about learning about them, their habitats. What do they do? All of those kind of things. Place it on your altar, sit, go into a meditative state, enter a trance state, and just say what it is to the spirit that you want to say. Speak from the heart and speak clearly, and see what happens. It might be in that moment nothing happens, but it might be that after that you start seeing little things that might be picked up as spirit communication. So for example, if you're working with a plant, you might start noticing that plant in lots of different places that you've never noticed it before. You know, it's about just attuning ourselves to our surroundings, because like I said at the beginning, these realms seem so distinct and separate, but actually they're not. They kind of bleed in and out of each other, you know. And so when you are working in that spirit realm, sometimes it might seem nothing's going to happen, but then after that, it's about just being aware and noticing how things have changed. So thank you for listening to me chatter on and on and on and on. So if anyone has any questions, please do pop them in the chat. I can see them and will try my best to answer them. I'm just going to have a look at a few comments, because it's really hard when you see them popping up, because people keep making really good comments and I want to address them every time. So I'm just going to have a look. Yeah, so someone's Karma Ann has put, I have multiple ancestral altars, ones to people I know who passed, some in my family line I never met, and those who influenced me, or those who influenced from within my life web. And I love that. That's beautiful. I too have many altars and they each serve a different purpose. So I love that. It's great. Is shadow work difficult for an empath? I think it can be, definitely. And I think that one of the things that can help is perhaps having someone to support you with that, you know, someone who is trusted, just because it is difficult. And if you're an empath anyway, you know, those feelings can be, what's the word? Magnified, you know, or amplified. So I think finding someone who is as knowledgeable as yourself, who is skilled, who you trust to kind of hold space for you. That's what I would suggest. having a decent space holder can just be great. Yeah, other people saying that they have the same problem, that being an empath makes that difficult. I totally get that. It can be so tricky. Yes, and again, Carmen has put, everything has a voice when I shut up and listen with my heart. I find that too. That's why I love going to the woods on my own. And there's a quote, isn't there, that if you take, if I take you to the woods with me, it must mean I like you. And that is so true. Yes, everything has a voice. And sometimes it's just being about being able to quieten our own minds, our own trauma for that time, just to kind of hear what's being said. There's so many messages there. Yes, tree spirits. Oh my God, I could yammer on all day about tree spirits. I will not. So my first encounter with a tree spirit was an elder tree. And so I'm in the UK and they grow everywhere. Like they're almost like a weed tree, nobody really wants them, which I hate. So I can remember when I moved into the home I live in now about 20 odd years ago. And the guy who lived here before, he was an avid gardener. So my garden is lovely. I'm so lucky. I can't take any credit for it though. So he was an avid gardener, but one of those gardeners who keeps it pristine. So no weeds, nothing that shouldn't be there. So after a few years of me living there, an elder tree started growing, and I love nature, weeds and all. So I was just letting it grow. And I can always remember somebody saying to me, "Oh, Emma, that tree there, that's a weed. You want to dig that out? You want to chop it down?" And I was like offended. I was like, "What? No, I'm not doing that." And I think from that moment, because I'd spoken up in defense of that tree, I mean, it might sound silly to some, but I swear it's the truth. Because I'd spoken up in defense of that tree, I always feel that was the first beginning relationship with the tree spirit. So the elder mother, as she is commonly known across many different areas. Where I live, though, I live in Nottinghamshire, but right on the border between Lincolnshire. So in Lincolnshire, the tree spirit of the elder mother is often referred to as the old girl or the old gal. So I really love that. Oh, I love tree spirits. So yes, just one simple thing you can do as well in the morning, any time of day, you can just choose a tree, you can go up to it and just pop your hand on it and spend some time there. But then what you can do is you can ask the tree, is there anything I need to know? You can say, remind me of who I am. You can ask it to give you strength. And so these are all ways you can begin to connect with tree spirits. Oh, I love tree spirits. Thank you so much for that question. I'm such a nerd. Yes, trees are wonderful. Oh, a pet tree. Yes, I love that. I haven't quite seen Robin Hood, not the real one anyway. But his spirit lives on. If you ever get a chance, just talking about tree spirits, if you ever get a chance to visit Sherwood Forest, which is just up the road from me, you must visit the Major Oak. Brilliant. Yes, I have a linden tree as well. Yeah, they're so interesting the way they bloom and grow. And I think, tree spirits really speak to us, and they can be vital in healing. There's so many studies now that say being in nature or even just being outside can be useful to us, So actually taking the time to connect with a tree spirit can be so calming and healing. It gives us that space, I think, because when we're out in nature, we're not clock watching, are we? We're just being ourselves. We're just living in the moment, enjoying that. So everybody should do that. That can be so good for healing the karmic wound. And of course, it fits into what we've been saying about the axis mundi and the world tree. So yeah, perfect. Oh, I love trees. Let's have a look what other people have been saying. Yes, dandelions as well. Oh, yes. I love dandelions. Oh, so Elo, you love heart. My book comes out on December the 8th, but I believe it's available for pre-order now. So that's Season Songs. And so when you, just as a little aside, when you start reading that, you'll see lots of the stuff we've talked about today. Because for me, nature is so vital to healing. And in nature, we can travel in all of those different realms as well. Because so often when we think about the axis mundi, we're just thinking about us as humans, aren't we? But actually, we all exist, all of the beings we share this world with, we all exist in that. And so it can be really useful to use that in your healing practice as well. So, for example, excuse me. So let's take, I don't know, let's take the celestial realm, because for me, on the surface of it, the celestial realm and plants can be seemingly at odds. You know, who would think of trees and plants when we're thinking about the sun and stars? However, when we refer back again to that axis mundi, we can work with those plants on the different levels. So in terms of the celestial level, what does that look like? Let's consider the needs of a tree or a plant. You know, how does the celestial realm impact them? And once we've kind of figured that out, we can begin to make kind of parallels then, can't we, with our own lives? And so we can go to that tree to access that space and do that work there. And there's just so many ways you can use it. So Karen has put, yes, absolutely. When I'm beyond stressed, the only action that always grounds me is working with a tree. Absolutely, one of the best things. And of course, grounding is related to our earthly, mundane world. And it helps us just to kind of, I don't know, feel at rest. We all love a bit of grounding, don't we? Scrolling through, bear with me, people. Yes, so Anne's put again, finding where you start and end in that feeling and where the other people start and end, know your boundaries. Absolutely. That is so good, knowing where you start and end, because so often we don't. It's such a, it can seem like a silly thing to say, but how many times, like I do it all the time at work, when you hear, you know, someone being distressed, your ultimate kind of instinct is to go there and help. But actually, you have to put that firm boundary in place, and you have to trust that other people are dealing with it, because quite often the more people who come, you know, all well-meaning, but it can just muddy the waters a bit. So yes, absolutely, knowing where you end and begin. I love that. That's great. So Philip's put, I've heard of doing healing shadow work through a form of archetype role play, where you act out your different specific damaged facets with a fellow worker acting the exact opposite or medicine facet of your chosen facet. I wonder if this would be possible working with spirits as well. What are your thoughts? Absolutely, yes. Do you mean, so do you mean kind of where you're working with spirits, so they're working with you to role play, or do you mean do you know what? I'm just going to go with what I think. Yes, that can be absolutely useful. And I think one thing to be certain of, though, is to make sure that it is a familiar spirit. That's what all I would say. Just, you know, because we want, like you would with a person, you wouldn't just ask any random person to do it with you. So I always think you should do that. But yeah, that's a really good way, actually, because again, it allows you, if you're doing it with somebody who also needs to work with trauma, it just allows you to see things from a different perspective. And I guess doing it with spirit again gives you a difference in perspective. It's going to be different, isn't it, than doing it with another person in the mundane realm. So yeah, absolutely, I love that idea. Thank you so much. And we are out of time. Thank you so much for listening, and I'm so sorry if I've rabbited on too long. Thank you all, you lovely people. You have a great day, and I can't wait to catch up with some of the other shows. So thank you so much.